Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. This is the programme where I speak to people in the public eye here in Wales in more depth than we usually get a chance to find out what made them and what still motivates them. My guest tonight is musician and composer Mal Pope. Swansea-born musician Mal Pope learned to sing in chapel, and before the age of 10, he'd started playing the guitar and writing songs. His career began at just 12 years old when he sent a tape of his music to John Peel at Radio 1. Soon afterwards, he signed to Elton John's Rocket Record Company. Since then, Mal's hosted his own BAFTA award-winning TV show, written songs for Cliff Richard and performed with stars like Bonnie Tyler. More recently, he's been writing musicals, including Amazing Grace, which had a sellout run at the Wales Millennium Centre. Mal Pope, you're very welcome, you and your guitar.
Thank you.
It's unusual for me to interview somebody with a guitar. Before we go into any detail of your life and career, all those people there that you've worked with, people look up to you, but who do you look up to?
Who do I look up to? I mean, Elton John, obviously, because he's lasted so long, great songs, and a really good man. The money's raised for AIDS charities. And he's always been supportive of new talent. And at one stage, it was my chance to have that light shone on my career,
Well, you very professionally teased what we're going to talk about later on. So congratulations on
there we
that.
are.
But it's an important part of this programme is to get right back to the beginning and wind back to your childhood. As I said in that video report then, it was very much a chapel upbringing, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little gospel hall. So in many ways, music was very much an important part of it, particularly on a Sunday, because of the way the church was set up. We didn't have any musical instruments, although my grandmother, 4 foot tall, 5 foot wide, Mavanri, she was the pump harmonium player in our chapel. On a Sunday, no instruments. So Uncle Dan would get up and he'd pitch the hymn, and the whole church, it sounds like the Waltons, but it was, everybody would sing in 4-part harmony. We had a reputation as being a good gospel hall singing congregation. And so even as a babe in arms, I'd sort of find my note. And, I'm still doing backing vocal sessions, having learnt it at that age.
So music right from the very beginning. But, chapel upbringings can be sometimes strict, sometimes difficult. What was it like for you? Was it a strictly religious upbringing?
It was strict, but not strict at the same time. So we adhered to many rules, church 3-4 times on a Sunday. But my dad had been through the war in the Navy. He'd seen everything. It's funny, when you're 16, your parents know nothing. By the time you're 21, you can't believe how much they've learnt in the last 5 years. It took me a while to realise that when I was in, and I will drop a lot of names, but when I used to go to see Elton John and my dad was there, my dad had seen everything in life, including people dying. And that had left he had a very big heart, my dad. So he had a very strong faith, which I think he imparted to all the family, but he had a big heart for people.
We're counting on you to drop names at the programme. How did it shape you and what sort of faith do you have now?
What sort of faith do I have now? Well, it's interesting, and maybe that's why I brought the guitar, because when I was a kid, it was very black and white. My job was to save the world. Honestly, that was my mission in life. So if I was with Elton John staying at his house, I'd ask him to get the Andre Crouch gospel records out so we could talk about church.
Wow.
But luckily, I still have a faith. It has changed, it has matured. I see more grey than black and white these days. And in my music, I've been able to address that as well.
And I think when you come to sing that song, we keep looking forward to the rest of the programme.
It's going to be great. The rest of this programme will be fantastic. I can't wait.
I assure you it already is. How did Elton John respond to your missionising then with him?
He was great. I mean, he wasn't that much older than me, really. He's got a lot much older than me now, obviously. But when I was a kid, he didn't have any brothers and stuff. And I was like the record company mascot. So I'd stay at Elton's house. We would play Subbuteo football. I beat him 3-2. He was very good at bar football. He had a whole games room. And, I went training with Watford Football Club because he knew how much I loved football. I remember one day they said, "You're going to have a special outing tomorrow." They picked me up in a taxi from the hotel. I went to the studio, knocked on the door. Pete Townsend opened the door. It was their recording studio of The Who. And Elton was recording Pinball Wizard. And they'd got me a chair above the piano booth for me to sit and watch Elton recording all day.
Right, well, we've got to explain now to people how you got from the Gospel Hall in Swansea to Pete Townsend and all this. You were 12, weren't you? Is that right?
Yes, I was 12 years old. I'd been writing songs for the previous 3 years. And in sort of church youth group on a Friday and a Sunday night, they'd get me with my guitar and sit me on the piano stool and I'd sing my new songs. And a friend of my brother's, a guy called Mike Nicholson, sadly no longer with us, said, you should send these to John Peel on Radio 1.
Did you know who John Peel was?
I had no idea. His programme started at 10 o'clock, which was literally past my bedtime.
And he specialised in the unusual
music. But my brother's friend said, he's going to love you. So I got my dad's tape recorder, recorded the song, sent it off, John Peel, Radio 1. And a couple of weeks later, the letter came back. And it said, would you ask your dad to get in touch with us to record a session? I went up. They paid for me and my one brother. I had two brothers, so my mum and dad paid for the other one. We all went up together, new seats, recorded a session, and 6 weeks later, Elton John called the house and asked me to sign for his record company.
Right, okay. Stop a minute. Elton John called your house and asked you to sign for a record.
And
who answered the phone?
Well, actually, he's called a number of times.
Okay.
And what I remember once, I was in a school production of Christmas Carol, and my dad drove down my brother. I thought, what's happened? Something must have gone wrong. He said, quick, Elton's going to ring back. He's going to call back now. I mean, because he was that, so he was very hands-on in that sort of sense. But he was just, I mean, he just loved new music. And, you know, the John Peel session, I mean, if I'm honest, you know, Sliding Doors, there were two record companies interested. They liked Elton because he'd done a lot of stuff with them. There's another company, we think they're a bit fly-by-night. They're called Virgin.
Oh, they'd never come to anything.
So I went with Elton John, and the rest is history. But it was amazing.
Was it terrifying or exciting or a mixture of...
I was 13 years old by the time I started recording. I was blasé. That's what was supposed to happen. It was the age of Opportunity Knocks. You'd be on Opportunity Knocks as Mary Hopkin on a Monday. By the following weekend, you'd be signed to Paul McCartney.
For some of our younger viewers, wonder what opportunity. It was a bit like the X Factor.
X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, all of those rolled into one. People became stars overnight, and I sort of expected it to happen. I wasn't surprised that it happened.
So you had that youthful confidence or arrogance, even.
Yes, that's what I did, you know, and people liked it, and so I just enjoyed the attention.
So that was a few years, this period you were writing songs, releasing songs, releasing singles and albums. We hear a lot of tales of rock and roll excess all the time. Yeah. I'm sure it wasn't like that for a 13-year-old lad.
Well, you know, I went to Christmas parties. But I was the mascot, so Elton would take me around. I remember him waking up Mickey Dolenz from The Monkey, who was fast asleep on a big cushion, to get him to sign my autograph book. I was terrified of Brian Eno when he was sat next to Brian Ferry because of the way he was dressed, you know. So I was there. I was in the middle of it, but I was very much protected. I know that when they signed...
You were protected.
When I was signed, they called them together. They said, this is a 14-year-old kid. You know, we don't swear in front of him. We don't do anything inappropriate in front of him. And they never did, you know. And I think my dad saw more stuff in the Navy than I did as a kid.
I was going to say your parents must have had some worry though, and particularly with the upbringing in the Gospel Hall, they must have been worried.
The lad who actually signed me was Elton John's mentor. He'd actually, you know, signed him to his first sort of record deal. A guy called Steve Brown, and his parents were in the Salvation Army, and that's what swung it. That they had some sort of belief. I mean, what are you going to do? They were very encouraged. My parents were always very encouraging. They were worried. I'm sure they were terrified. But they probably people didn't know as much then as they do now. It was, you know, sex and drugs and rock and roll, but they didn't know the ins and outs of what might have happened. And none of it ever did. I'm
going to prompt you to pick up your guitar now, right, because we're getting to that point anyway, but not quite, because you've said, I think, that it was punk that did it for you.
Yes.
Really, was it? Because all of a sudden, instead of being fresh-faced and young, you were old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned, yeah.
How did that feel?
It was awful. I mean, I was in the right place with the right people at the wrong time. I mean, at that stage, I was managed by Harvey Goldsmith, the biggest rock promoter in the world. You know, I was going to see concerts with David Bowie and Bruce Springsteen, free tickets in the VIP area, but I couldn't get arrested as a recording artist. And it was hard, but what are you going to do? So I came back to Wales and started working in broadcasting, but always wanted to be the musician that I dreamed of being.
The reason that we've got you to pick up your guitar is because, well, you've said that you've recently got your songs back. I don't really know what that means, Mal.
So you sign your songs to a publishing company and they keep them forever and ever. Okay. But Judy Zook, who's also on Rocket...
You said you were going to drop names.
Sorry, Clang. She said to me, Elton's giving me my songs back. She said, you should ask him, and I did, and he did. But the lovely thing is, I'm not sure what your feelings were when you were 13, 14, 15.
I best not go into that.
But, you know, maybe you had a diary, but I wrote songs
did
at
have
that
a diary.
stage. Well, that would be
We're not,
interesting.
we're
Yeah.
not going down that road.
And
You had songs, okay.
Yeah, I had songs. One was called A Child's Prayer, and I recorded this at Abbey Road with Elton John and
At
full
Abbey
orchestra,
Road.
right? On the day that I actually walked in and there's Eric Morecambe sat next to Elton John. I mean, as if I wasn't a little bit nervous about playing the piano. It was that sort of event. But the song was called A Child's Prayer, and I'd written it as a 14-year-old. You know, as I rest my head to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. When I got the song back, 40 years later, I was able to write a third verse to maybe, because I thinking what the child was and what the man that I'd become in the meantime.
And it's the third verse you're going to sing for us.
As I rest my head to sleep, I think about the child I used to be. A simple faith gets torn apart, and disappointments break a heart. But looking deeper, when I can, I see the child inside the man, still in love, safe above in heaven.
That's lovely, but a little bit sad.
Well, you know, you do, as you grow up, you know, you do carry disappointments. And how do you get over those disappointments? Particularly when you get a faith and you think, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, why isn't it working? But there have been so many highlights along the way. You know, I've probably got less money than I would have had if I was a #1 artist, but I've got more stories.
You've got more stories and more names to
More
tell
names
us.
to drop.
So disappointments, but not disappointed necessarily.
Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be here doing what I do.
Well, we're glad that you are, because we've got plenty more to talk to Mal about. But we'll take a short break. When we come back, Mal and I will talk about other twists and turns in his career. Mal Pope, before the break, we were talking about disappointments, but not disappointed. In some ways, you've had to reinvent yourself, or you've reinvented yourself. Do you adapt easily to things?
Yes, I mean, having 4 children meant I had to. You know, I remember being completely broke. And you have to keep this facade. You know, when the work stops, you don't get paid, do you? You have to find something else to do. And so they were always a great encouragement to make sure I got another gig. Adaptable? Yeah. I've always thought, well, why not give it a go? What is the worst that could happen? Disaster.
You don't give up easily.
I don't give up. No, and actually, a friend of mine, I thought he was going to say he loved my songwriting or my voice or my piano playing. He said, the thing I really loved about you is you never gave up.
Okay. Even if he thought you should have.
Yeah, absolutely. Many people have.
Have you ever been floored by something not working out then?
Oh, yes. And then the disappointments kick in. You know, I built a theatre on Swansea High Street to do a thing called Cappuccino Girls.
I remember, yes.
You know, we built it from scratch with no public funding. And then at the end of it, it came to an end and then nothing. You know, I remember going to America to do a pilot for a TV show, very much like the show I used to do on HTV called The Mal Pope Show. Going to America, we chose Whitney Houston's musical director to be the female character to work with me. It was a great cast. The director had done Live Aid from America. And coming back, and nothing. Not even a phone call to say it might not happen. Just nothing.
How do you pick yourself up then?
It's hard. It is really hard. But there's a guy called Mario Macronelli, Enzo Macronelli's dad. And when we did a musical about Tommy Father Boxer, I spent a bit of time with him, not in the gym. I was watching as Mike Doyle, who played Tommy Father, got battered. But Mario used to say...
Is that why you did it?
Absolutely, I'm not going to go. And Mario said, we all take a punch. You go down on one knee, you put your arm on the ropes, and you count to 8. Then you get back up. You don't get back any sooner. You got to get your head back together. And he wasn't talking about boxing.
So you, when disappointments happen, you diversified is the modern term.
Yes.
You've already mentioned broadcasting and the HTV show. Some great experiences there. And what were the best?
Fantastic. John Cale, the Rockefeller Centre, the Rainbow Rooms, talking about Garnet.
I remember watching it.
Playing with the Bee Gees. You know, the nights we had, I suppose the best one was the Christmas shows were always great. We had Real Snow. One year we had Dave Edmunds, Bonnie Tyler. Who else do we have? Who had on keyboards? Oh, Howard Jones on keyboards. Terry Williams from Dire Straits on drums with my band. It was fantastic. We finished the show. It was a live show. We finished the show. They put the cameras down and everybody danced all night to like I Hear You Knocking. It was wonderful.
Then you did some theme tunes, Fireman Sam.
I was young. I needed the money. Again, that was an odd thing because you never know what's going to happen when the phone rings. I'd already sung Super Ted. And I got asked to do a cartoon about a fireman, and I said yes, and actually that's probably the thing worldwide that I'm known most for because it's in different languages, different territories. I get emails every week about it.
I'd forgotten that you did Super Ted, and that was a bit of a
I don't like to boast.
Can you remember all the words to it?
Who's the bear shoots through the air like a streak of red? Super Ted, Super Ted.
I think that's the highlight. No, the song before it was. So bringing you up to date, really, and your music now, I suppose, for you. What do you get from it now? I mean, apart from if you were hired for doing a theme tune or to put it into a commercial setting or something, what do you get when you make music?
Do you know, I go into a different place. You know, when I stop, when I was in the canteen just playing, I do go to a different place. And I just want to, in the time I have left, obviously, I am mature. I am aware of that. But I'm a better piano player, songwriter and singer than I was when I was 13. I've learned my craft, hopefully. But I want to say things now. So the new songs I'm writing are hopefully addressing some of those situations. A song I wrote last year was used in the You're Not Alone campaign for the Welsh Government for domestic abuse. I'm writing songs about refugees. I'm writing songs about being a man trying to cope with his faith or lack of faith. I want to say things that actually have some sort of meaning.
So I won't say old age, but in your mature years, you've become sort of a protest singer or a...
Well, yeah, the thing is, I've got 3 grandchildren now. What on earth have our generation done to this earth? You know, and what am I going to leave them? You know, if I was just going to pop off and that was it, but I've got a responsibility to at least 3 children now to say something to try and fight that they've got something to live for.
And can you do that we mentioned at the beginning musicals as a form that you've studied in. Can you do that in musicals? Yeah, telling stories.
Telling stories. You know, there's nothing. You know, if you go back to Jesus, he told parables. You know, because they hit home. They hit home now. You know, if he tried to explain the theology of whatever it was about the prodigal son, it might make sense, but it wouldn't have the same resonance. So the prodigal son story I used in a musical about the Welsh revival. Evan Robertson, a 26-year-old miner called by God to lead a worldwide revival, his biggest antagonist was a guy called the Reverend Peter Price, who was a Cambridge-educated minister who despised the whole thing, Evan Roberts. But he was the older brother in the prodigal son story. He had never had a party thrown for him. Why the younger son having all this glory?
So it's telling stories as well as dealing with issues in that. And how do you write? Do songs come to you out of nowhere? Are you inspired, or is it hard work?
With the musicals, I'd often set off on a run along Swansea Bay with the thought, I need a song that does this at this tempo to take the story to this part. And by the time I came back from the run, I'd have it. It was just, it was almost magical. I will sit at the piano. I took over a late night radio programme for a dear friend called Chris Needs, who sadly passed away suddenly. But it meant I was working from 10 till 1 every night, and I didn't want to wake up the family, so I'd stay in my garden shed until 4 writing songs. And I you know, any musician will tell you now they've got a triple album ready to go because they wrote so much in lockdown.
I was going to ask you how lockdown was for you. Was it
it was interesting,
productive period or not?
Yeah, it was incredibly productive.
You haven't been able to tour, have you?
No touring. I mean, I've got the longest running tour schedule, but the tour T-shirts have just got crossings out everywhere. It's been interesting because you've had to adapt. I was lucky that I did have a garden shed with bits and bobs in, so I could record and I could broadcast from there. It's been different with my band because we couldn't meet to record all together. I mean, we used to waste so much time telling stories and drinking tea when we did get together. So it's been a lot more efficient.
Focus your mind.
And so I send the songs out and they send it. It's a bit like, you know, correspondence course making of records. But it's brilliant because I'm always excited about what they're going to send back to me to make the record.
And during lockdown, you came up with the Christmas song as well. Was that a surprise to you, the way it was received?
It was brilliant. You know, Carolyn Harris, the MP whose project it was to create Christmas hampers, I was in school with her. You never say no. And she'd asked me to do something.
She sat in the same chair that you've sat in.
Yeah. Well, you know, exactly. And then to actually, all right, what we're going to do, to work with people I really like and admire, Steve Balsamo, who's got the most wonderful voice, and he should, and is a megastar, but the world hasn't quite caught on to it. And to do that, but then to pull it together. You know, for the video, I brought a friend of mine who's been working with on a Steven Spielberg film all year in Malta in Germany, right?
Of course.
He's back on holiday. I say, we need to change this farm shed into a cross between Santa's Grotto and the stable of Bethlehem, and he did. And then we got the Salvation Army, and then we got people, you know, if you ask people with a good heart, they often say yes.
You were very much a Swansea person.
Yes.
How important is Swansea to you? Wales, how important is that?
It's always been, you know, I could have, you know, it's not the centre of the entertainment world, Swansea, but I wanted my kids to grow up near the sea. And so I do fight its corner. On many occasions, I've lost that battle. It's a wonderful part of the world because the people are they're so funny. You know, you go around Swansea Market. I mean, he could just write I always say Dylan Thomas didn't write it. He just wrote it down.
He just wrote it down.
He wrote it down, and that's still the case.
We've spent a lot of time looking back, and we've looked forward as well. Is it an uncertain lifestyle? You mentioned some of the disappointments.
Oh, I mean, totally. You know, but that's the excitement. You know, of wondering. You know, I remember getting a call. Do you want to go on tour with Art Garfunkel? It's going to mean 3 months going all around Europe, and you don't get paid. Okay, and I've got 4 kids by that stage, a mortgage and a house with a dog and all those type of things, and I'm working for HTV and the BBC at the same time. I have to go to them and say, can I have 3 months off, please? You'd be nuts to do it, but I'd have been nuts not to, because it was the most wonderful time. Max Boyce rang up when I was
Somebody
suffering
else
from...
who sat in the seat.
Absolutely. I just lost the Song for Europe. I wasn't going to be the Eurovision entry for Britain. I was in a bad place. He said, do you want to come on tour to Southeast Asia? You know, I mean, uncertain, 6 weeks going around with Max Boyce around the world changed. That really did change my life.
Have you got more to do?
Oh, there's the one thing. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I haven't done it yet.
You still feel that?
Absolutely. I'm convinced. Maybe I never will. But I haven't done whatever I'm supposed to do quite yet. So until I do, or till I'm not able to, I'll keep going.
And we'll keep an eye on what happens next. Mal Pope, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it for this programme. Join me next time when I'll be finding out what makes and what motivates somebody else who's in the public eye. Until then, my huge thanks to Mal Pope. Thank you for watching, and good night.